Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Live in a Rental for Over a Year Without Paying Rent? Good luck in jail. Last summer I bought a house trailer and decided to rent it out. It needed some work, so I posted 2 months free rent for putting carpet down in the living room, hooking up the hot water heater and putting in a toilet. Got a nice couple with a newborn willing to do it. Great. No lease, month to month. No security deposit and the rent was $450 a month. So they did the work, so I didn't ask for rent for 2 months. Everything was fine. Side note, there are a few little state laws that come into play. If you don't pay rent for 3 consecutive months, you are considered a squatter, which means the landlord doesn't have to fix the property and can actually padlock it and deny you entry. If you're on house arrest and get formally evicted, you could be violated for it. Also, you can be formally evicted even if you have already moved out, so the landlord can get rent due. Also, even though there are eviction bans, if it happened before the ban, then it can still go through. Plus a few other conditions that still allow someone to be evicted. It's up to the judge really. Fast forward 5 months and still no rent money. Yes, they had a newborn and they were young and didn't have a lot of money, but the husband can spend $1,500 on a new engine for his project car. They can afford to go out to eat and spend money on electronics, but no rent. So after that 3rd month I did nothing. The weather was turning cold. I didn't put in the furnace like I promised, and if they hadn't had a newborn I would have padlocked the house. They were bragging about their tax refund. I gave them a shot to catch up and they basically said that they knew their rights and were in a rent strike, illegally I might add. You will see later. COVID happened, husband got laid off, so I gave them a break. When he went back to work I asked for back rent again and was told to duck off. I finally had enough. I told them they had 14 days to get out or I was doing a formal eviction, and seeing he was on house arrest he knew what that meant. I honestly was trying to keep him from having to go back to jail and keep an eviction off of their record. I was trying to be nice and civvy. So they left and I cut my losses, until I checked the property. Everything they put in the removed. Everything they got free rent for was gone. I got upset and filed for a formal eviction. It didn't go as they hoped. They said I didn't provide heat, so they went on a rent strike. Only they didn't file that with the courts or hold the money aside. They just thought they could stop paying rent. What they put into the trailer was less than the rent. The judge agreed with me that seeing they took everything I was due those 2 months rent. And the biggest. He started slamming my character, so I said, well, you didn't tell me you were going to be going on house arrest when you rented the property. Before then the judge looked bored, but he perked up. He asked them if that was true, they responded that it was, and he was ready to make his ruling. I received 15 months back rent at $450 a month and $2,000 in damages because the way they removed the stuff they damaged a lot of things. As for him, the judge said he had no choice but to turn the eviction over to his parole officer. Fast forward to this month. His house arrest was violated and he was arrested. They actually had the nerve to ask me to speak on his behalf. I didn't. Ruling was his remaining 6 months and now being spent in jail. They have a bad eviction on their record and they owe me money. Know the law before you play the game. The next one is titled, I'm Not Gonna Pay for Your Comfort. This happened last month. By some universe coincidences, me and my girlfriend ended up living with another couple in a rented house to split costs. It was a big house, so each couple would have their own bathroom, bedroom, and we shared the common places like the kitchen and the living room. The house was originally rented by a co-worker who by the time of this story was no longer in the house anymore, but all the furniture was his and he gifted it all to me when he left. This other couple was really annoying. They would leave their dirty dishes in the sink with rotten food and only wash them until the weekend. Or leaving their dog to poop all over the house. One time the guy was cooking in a torn-out shorts and his underwear was very visible. This was really uncomfortable to my girl. Anytime I talked to them about all the issues that bothered us, they used to change their habits for a few days and then it was all the same. But the house was rented and they arrived first, so I wasn't able to kick them out. And if I tried, I was afraid of the guy since he is a bad-tempered butthole. The last straw was this summer. It was really hot and this bastards liked the AC at full blast day and night, even when they weren't home. And if I turned it off they would get mad and immediately turn it on after telling me how they could not sleep without the AC at max. Okay, I did my best to wear a hoodie and sleep with my winter clothes in the middle of the ducking summer inside the house, just so they would be comfortable and for the sake of saving a few bucks in rent money. And of course the inevitable happened. The electric bill came and it was 4 times higher than the usual, and it was a lot. So I talked to them about how their use of the electricity was out of control and why we should split the bill 25/75 since me and my girl are almost never home. It turned into a huge fight and his only argument was that we all use the electricity, so we all should pay the same. He wouldn't listen to my arguments and there was nothing I could do. I ended up paying the same amount. After this bastard and his girlfriend made me pay for their comfort, they started doing a lot of passive-aggressive stuff like throwing out my unspoiled food while they would leave their rotten food on my fridge. Or using their TV at the highest volume while I tried to sleep. I get up really early to exercise before work, so I go to sleep really early. And a lot of things like that in a very childish manner. In addition of still leaving on every kind of electrical device in the house while they were out. Then I knew I had to get out of that house. There was no money saving anymore due to the high costs of the bills, so me and my girlfriend started to look for a place for only the 2 of us and our 2 rescued dogs. We found an affordable and comfortable house with plenty of room for our dogs, so we pulled the trigger. We talked to the owner of the previous house about us leaving and he had no problem at all, so it was all set. We waited until the other couple were out of town for the weekend and took every last thing we owned out of that house and moved out. I left them without any furniture, I mean no stove, no microwave, not even a table to eat. I left my keys at the entrance of their bedroom door and a note that said, "We couldn't bear your attitudes anymore, so we left with our belongings. Have a nice life wasting your own money." The owner of the house, which became a very good friend of mine, later told me that they told him how I took out all of their belongings. He knew that they were mine and told them. I wish I was there to look at their faces. Have fun eating fast food in the floor, buttholes. The next one is titled, "Who Has the Stuffed Shells?" A few years ago I received week checks for my children, special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. Not sure if it varies by state, but in my state each check is 1 transaction. So essentially you can have 5 or 6 transactions while using them. So I go to ShopRite, it's evening and very busy. I wait on a line of 4 people. Finally my turn comes, and it was taking a while. I had 4 or 5 checks, can't remember. So some rude lady starts berating me. She's 2 people behind me. She goes on and on saying how it's rude that I didn't tell her I had all different transactions. Loudly, mind you. Also please keep in mind that every line was long. So I tell her to mind her business and wait her turn like an adult. She keeps going, so badly her husband walks outside. So here's for the revenge. I worked at a local pizza restaurant at the time. One evening, shortly after this incident, that lady comes in with a large group that happens to be one of my regulars. I wasn't waiting on them, but I know she recognized me. I saw her whispering to my regular and looking at me. I know she was telling her about the ShopRite line situation. So I told the server she had to let me know when the food was coming out. And asked the server what she ordered. And I told the server the whole story. And she agreed to let me serve her food. Now please note, I did not mess with her food. But the look on her face as I walked to the table with the food was priceless. Even better, as I said, "Who had the stuffed shells?" And I placed that dish in front of her. And she looked horrified. I didn't mess with her food, but oh, she thought I did. She barely ate her meal. The next one is titled, "I Had Unknown Language Skills and It Saved Me from Some Horrible Problems with a Coworker." I worked in an office where I tried very hard to work well with others. The company had fair hiring practices, which was one of the reasons I liked them. Social justice parents. One week I had a bad GI infection that meant I had to spend more time than usual in the bathroom without much warning, but I told my boss and she was very supportive because I came in. I was a person who looked as vanilla as can be. But because of my background, I deliberately joined the only fraternity on campus that welcomed international members. That had an interesting advantage that would pay off 2 decades later. You see, members of our chapter spoke a language that I had taken a few weeks of in 4th grade. Not very much, but enough words stuck, but enough basic ones to sometimes allow me to understand basic sentences. Some of my fraternity brothers, who spoke this language fluently, put together a handbook of phrases in the language which would let us know for sure when they were insulting us. We got back at them by giving them nicknames based on the dirty words they had translated for us, which they found funny as heck. Right. So, the other thing you should know is that my job was a white-collar job that required me to dictate memos, or take minutes of meetings, which meant that I would tape these meetings with a mini recorder, and send the tapes to a typing pool for typing. After which I edited them or proofed them when needed. I tended to keep the mini recorder with me because we sometimes had unexpected meetings. As I was indisposed in our quite large restroom waiting for my GI to settle down, a number of individuals who spoke this language came into the bathroom and started chatting. When I heard my boss's name and familiar slurs, I pulled out the recorder and started taping. It turns out that one of the speakers was a person on our staff who felt very self-entitled, not entirely without reason, and was a bit lazy. He underperformed constantly but had a high-level company connection, so couldn't be touched. Thinking that by speaking in this language he could say anything he wanted about the individual, he went into a diatribe that mostly went past me. But it was clear he was talking about our boss in very pejorative and sexist ways. One of the other speakers tried diligently to shut him up because he was a very kind person, defending the boss, etc. But that only enraged the insulter and made him go on and on. This really upset me because it was clear his attitude was based mainly on sexism and the feeling that he should be boss instead. But she was in fact much more qualified for her position than this waste of space. It took me a long time to do something about this because I don't like making waves or unnecessary meanness on the job. But then my boss started getting internal hate mail slid under her door, which she found very disturbing. So I spoke to her privately one afternoon after he had left for the day. I played her the tape, translated where I could, and gave it to her. She took it to her boss, etc. She didn't take disciplinary action, which might have meant fighting his insider. Instead, she did the one thing he couldn't fight. She started calling him in for meetings about his project statuses 15 minutes before he dared leave for the day, which would then last 2 to 3 hours. We were exempt employees, so he was stuck. He hated one-on-one meetings with her because in them she could review errors he had made, which played havoc with his self-image. Interestingly, after a while, he started changing his behavior, working harder and more carefully, which shortened his meetings as he improved. The defending staff member was rewarded for his behavior at the time, which he was pleased at but never understood why. Until after I retired. I called him one day because I had heard that the problematic employee had left the company. As I signed off the call, I used a popular phrase in the language. He said, "Wait, how much language do you speak?" I told him, "More than badly acting ever realized." He then got it. He just laughed and laughed and laughed. The next one is titled, "Racist Teacher Gets His Car Burned and Carrier Lost." This happened to my dad in the 80s in communist Bulgaria when the government had issues with the Turkish and changed their names. Didn't let them in the ruling party, didn't let them guard the borders, and didn't let them to talk Turkish. There is also that teacher who hated my dad for being Turkish. Often tried to get my dad in trouble, often failed. That teacher also lived far away from that school and the bus didn't go there, so he really needed his car. He was stupid enough to tell the class where he lived, important later. A lot of my dad's classmates hated that teacher, so they gathered to break his lights with a slingshot. My dad was going home and went past them. The teacher saw them and they ran away, except my dad, who was far away from them, already going home. On the next day my dad was expelled for that. My granddad was angry. He had loads of rakija and came up with a plan. He went to his house and saw damn fingerprints on the car. Without even trying to blame the other kids, the teacher straight away blamed my dad. My granddad, in a fit of anger, made Molotov and burned his car down. The teacher didn't show up in the school again since his car burned and lost his career. The only thing I heard from my dad is that the teacher was working as a trash collector. My granddad even threatened the other teachers' cars to be burned down if they didn't take my dad back for false accusations. They took him back. My granddad was a feared person in that neighborhood. The next one is titled, "Want Us to Make Sure Every Piece is Included?" Okay, we'll add a few extra too. A few years ago when moving houses, we had to sell our IKEA Pax wardrobe as it wouldn't fit in our new place. This thing was massive and took hours to originally build. My wife diligently took photos of it open, closed at different angles and advertised it as for sale online. Soon after we had a winning bidder, and for a pretty decent price too. We arranged a pick-up date and all seemed to be going smoothly. A few days before the arranged pickup date, the buyer dropped by unannounced and demanded to see the wardrobe right away or he wouldn't buy it. My wife was a bit flustered but let him anyways in and showed it to him. He did some measurements and after appearing to be satisfied with those, rudely told my wife that we'd better not damage it during disassembly. All screws, and dowels, etc. be properly accounted for, that we tape all the long pieces together with cardboard in between them so they don't get scratched. And also that all the manuals are in decent condition and present so he can properly reassemble everything. His behavior made my wife feel nervous and attacked. He left without any thank for your time or anything, just a threat that if all wasn't as he expected he'd not buy it. So, of course, we took care of disassembling the wardrobe and ensured pieces were separated by cardboard as to not get damaged. I also made sure all the manuals were present and accounted for. Lastly, I took great care to ensure that all screws and dowels were accounted for and in a sturdy plastic bag that wouldn't rip. However, because he was a butthole to my wife, I took a screw from another IKEA furniture set we had disassembled during the move and added it to the bag of screws and dowels for the wardrobe, ensuring that no matter how well he put it all back together, there'd be at least one remaining. The next one is titled, "Give Me a Hard Time on the Job?" Okay, I'm out. I once found myself in a situation where I was forced to take a job at Blockbuster Video. I had previously come from working in an independent store with lots of freedom, working with my closest friends that eventually went out of business, go figure. Anyhow, my need for money outstripped my pride so I succumbed to the corporate machine that was Blockbuster Video. Every day I put on that uniform it stripped away from a new layer of my soul. Regardless, I'm an amicable fella that tends to get along with everybody so the new folks I worked with became fast friends, save for management. The managers there were the stereotypical management archetypes we all love to hate from every film we've ever seen. So, while being amicable, I just couldn't really get along with these two people, the assistant manager in particular. That being said, I always did my job and did it well, I just didn't let those two push me around. In hindsight, I was likely out of line sometimes but there's no fixing that today. It's probably worth noting at this point that before taking the job at Blockbuster I had also sent out my resume to an agency in the video game industry that I was woefully underqualified for. I somehow got an interview there but nothing ever came of it. Fast forward a few months. I'm working the midday shift at work on a Tuesday afternoon. This was at the height of the time where, if a new release wasn't in, you could get a rain check to get it for free the next time around. A couple had come in to rent a film that I thought was completely rented out when in actuality it wasn't out yet, it was the "coming soon" boxes that were out on the shelves. I apologized to the couple and scanned the appropriate barcode to credit them for the film on their next visit. The whole while the assistant manager is watching this unfold. When the couple leaves she explains the error that I had made and tells me that she is going to have to write me up for theft against the company. I've obviously a bit upset by this as I've never stolen anything in my life. I explained that I didn't see it as theft but she won't hear any of it and proceeds to write me up on a pink slip. Once she's done she says I'll have to sign the slip as an admission that I was aware that what I had done was wrong. Needless to say, I refused to do it. There was no way I was going to label myself as a thief when I had made a simple mistake in which my manager could have intervened and stopped. As we're arguing over the slip the phone in the store rings. The assistant manager picks up the phone and tells me it's for me. The voice on the other end is unfamiliar to me but rings some bells in the back of my mind. It turns out it's the man I had interviewed with months before for the job I was woefully underqualified for. He explains that he had called my house, I was still living at home at the time, and my parents told him I was working. When he heard I was working at Blockbuster he decided I shouldn't have to endure that for one more second, he was the best boss ever. So he asked for the local number there, he lived in Philly, I was in Canada, and called the store immediately to tell me I had the job if I wanted it. Obviously, I said yes. I hang up the phone with a grin on my face. The assistant manager says that if I don't sign the slip right away she'll be forced to send me home without pay pending likely being fired. I say that I have a better idea and take my stupid Blockbuster shirt off there on the spot and tell her that she can kindly go duck herself, leaving her there to work the rest of the shift by herself with her stupid pink slip dangling in her hand. I went in a couple of years later to rent a movie. She was serving me at the counter. The only thing I said to her was, "So, still working at Blockbuster, eh?" The last one is titled, "Talk to Me Like I'm Beneath You." Okay, you asked for it. I am the location manager at a small snowmobiling resort in Montana. My job is to make sure that all the different departments in the resort are running well. The time between February to April is our off-season, meaning that we are only about 40% full. We lose a lot of our employees during this time because they make less money, so they go back to their hometowns. To make up for this, I work in a lot of departments, helping out to cover scheduling gaps. I'm hanging a welcome banner for a popular ski team in our lobby near the front desk. A man approaches the front desk and says to me, "My name is Darren Jacobs. Good morning. How can I help you?" He gives me a look and says, "Obviously I'm checking in. Why else would I be standing here?" He mumbles "idiot" under his breath. Just then the front desk clerk comes around the corner to help the man. I nod to him and say, "It's okay. I have this one." He goes back to finishing breakfast. "I'm sorry, sir. Check-in isn't until 3 p.m. It is currently 7 a.m. Your room won't be ready until then." His face turns red, and he starts saying that I should do it out of goodwill, and that he's a paying customer. I smile a big smile when he says, "Goodwill. I can check him in, as we are less than half full, but I won't check him in because he's an entitled butthole. I'm sure you'll think of something," I say with a big smile. He goes into a long tirade. We are on a mountain, and the only business open this time of year. You need a hotel room key to get into any building, including restaurants. How the hell am I supposed to know when it's 3 p.m? I'm on vacation. I pause, point to a clock in the lobby, and say, "It's when the little hand is on the 3. I saw him several times that week. Walking past the front desk, or coming down to get towels. Every time I saw him, I put on my best smile and said, 'Checking in?' Bonus story, we lock the laundry room at night. It reopens at 9 a.m. because it's next to a row of guest rooms. He told a housekeeper that he forgot his phone in there, and when she opened the door to help him, he started loading clothes into the washer, laughed at her, and left. She went home for the night. He came down to the front desk demanding that we let him in so his clothes don't mildew. Housekeepers have the keys, sir. We don't have keys to their areas. I need my ducking clothes, or I'm going to sue you." I said in a deadpan voice, "Yes, sir. I'll send someone up to kick the door down, immediately. Thanks for listening."